Okay, well, first, thanks everyone for attending. We really appreciate you taking time today. Adam and I are very excited to be here. As Bill mentioned, I have been in the analytics space for the entirety of my career, most of that in the JD Edwards space, and couldn't be more excited. I am passionate about data and passionate about analytics. Um, I joined Preferred this year, and so I'm relatively new in my current role, but have a long history, having come from the customer side. 10 years ago, as the CIO at ClickBar, we headed down this journey. So I'm excited to share some of that with you today, and talk through what that means from a JD Edwards ecosystem, as well as Power BI as a key technology. But ultimately, it's really about data driven and how does that happen with the JD Edwards environment. So we're real excited to share that. Adam?
Yes, thank you, Bill and team at GSI. And as mentioned, also been around in the JD Edwards ecosystem for the last 25 or so years, and seeing the technology evolution around analytics with things like Microsoft Power BI, which we're going to focus on today, and share that with you. Super exciting. So looking forward to it.
Right. Well, what does it mean to be data driven? That's really the overall theme that we want to address as we talk through what that means in a JD Edwards environment, the technology evolution that's happened over time, and how that continues to evolve both through Power BI tools and otherwise. But we will save some time for a live demonstration so that you can see how that all comes together and how you can really leverage JD Edwards on the back end, and leverage the most recent in technology and modern BI analytics to be transformational in the way you go about your data-driven journey. I've had the pleasure and challenge of doing that at a couple of companies, and there is a tremendous amount of value if you take an approach that really is around being data-driven. So we'll focus most around that and then save some time for some questions at the end. To start, there are a number of different frameworks out there that I think try to describe the same thing. What does that journey look like, and how do I fit in? How do I fit in as an individual, as a team, as a company? And making that leap to that data strategy continuum, this is one of the best ways we've found to really describe that. The different phases of that continuum, whether it's data aware, data proficient, data savvy, data driven. There's no right or wrong answer. Some companies have a hybrid across multiple areas, and that can depend upon what their team or department or organization is really trying to achieve and where they are in that journey. But it is, I think, a really important foundation to understand what that means. What does that mean in terms of our organization? So data aware, really not having any standardization all the way to the other end of the spectrum here with data driven. So just to get a better sense for what that looks like across our audience today, we do want to put a poll up here. Before we show that poll, just take a look, if you will, at these 4 different areas and try to identify where is your organization on this continuum. Is it data aware? Is it data proficient, data savvy, or data driven? And Bill, if you wouldn't mind just going ahead and putting that poll up, and we'll try to get a sense for the audience here today.
Okay, everyone should be able to see that. It looks like votes are already coming in.
And before we show the results here, being on this continuum is not a matter of whether or not you're using data. It's not a matter of the technology. In fact, you could be early on and just being data aware and try to tap into some of the latest in open source machine language, et cetera. This is really about a culture around being data driven and what that can mean to your organization. So Bill, you want to go ahead and take a look at the results?
We just share results, and you should be able to see that now.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. It's that's about what we typically see. In fact, the fact that you're on this webinar probably means that you have a concerted and intentional interest on what data-driven can achieve and the value it can bring to an organization. Okay, great. So as we think about what does that value look like and where can we achieve that across our organization, here's a couple of quotes from McKinsey. Organizations with data-driven culture, 23 times more successful in acquiring new customers, 6 more times likely to retain those customers, 19 more times more likely to be profitable. Real tangible results, value that can be tied back to being data-driven. And it's no surprise. You see the biggest companies in the world now are doing that with analytics that are more consumer-driven. There's no reason that can't be achieved from an enterprise analytics perspective as well. So when we think about that data-driven organization, we've worked with many customers that try to identify what does that mean. And it's hard to do because each company is different, each need is different, and the value is different. But here's a few examples, and one of my favorite expressions is trying to go from 80-20 to 20-80. And one of our customers, IGI Wax, tried to quantify that. And they said before we went down this path of being data-driven, before we launched and had the adoption we were trying to achieve with Power BI, with Quick Launch, we spent about 80% of our time just preparing the data. And they were a little more sophisticated than average, but they were still spending a tremendous amount of time preparing that data, then trying to analyze that data, and it didn't leave much time to make good decisions on that. By speeding that up, they were able to flip that on its end. So 20%, or even less in some cases, preparing and providing good analysis on that, and then they were able to put in place the right kind of decision making, the right kind of action. It's not an exact science, but they had plenty of examples to describe how that happened. A few other examples how that can be achieved and how data-driven approach can really achieve some quantifiable results. One customer reduced their AR credit disputes simply because they had immediate access to data. They estimate that's a 23 times increase in productivity. What used to take hours to resolve now happens in just a few minutes. On the process engineering side, this goes back actually to the IGI Wax example. Because they had that secure and trusted and high-performing data model in place, they found process engineering efficiencies that were a much higher multiple that reduced the amount of time that it was taking in a very specific area. Same thing with reduction in waste, where they've estimated now, and this was by taking that model and applying some machine learning to it with that stable data model. They estimated in the first year that they increased their profit, not revenue, their profit from waste, 8 to 10 million, and in subsequent years they've seen that increase even higher. So there's real value to be had. It's going to be different in every organization, but having a data-driven approach really does give you the benefit of that transformation. And the biggest area of transformation is where you have the amount of time that it used to take to prepare and govern and secure that data and making it available, and instead spending most of that time on really good analysis and making good decisions and actions as a result of that. One of the key areas where we have found the biggest value is the transfer information that's happened over time in the BI space. What used to be called traditional BI, and now Gartner will refer to it as modern BI. And Adam's going to talk a little bit about the journey of that, what Power BI has evolved into and what that can mean for your organization.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, so if you're looking at this slide, on the left-hand side, this goes all the way back to 2015. And you'll notice that there's 4 quadrants. So if you're not familiar with Gartner, they every year for a lot of different technologies have what's called the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And so you've got on one axis, the y-axis, ability to execute, and then on the x-axis, completeness of vision, And then the lower left-hand corner, niche players, then there's challengers above that, visionaries on the lower right, and then the leaders in the upper right. So the goal for Gartner, this quadrant, is to be as far up in the upper right-hand corner of the leaders quadrant. And so back in 2015, you'll notice that there was quite some large number of solution providers and software companies in that space. And then you'll notice on the chart on the right, which is 2016, 1 year later, there was only 3, Tableau, Click, and Microsoft. And actually that was, of the last probably 10 or 15 years, in 2016, I think, was the only year that maybe Oracle happened to not be on that just because of the transition, and they came back on in 2017. But the main thing to take away from this was Gartner really changed the game. For a long time, there was enterprise reporting. We'll speak to that throughout today's session as well. Then there was BI, which now got rephrased as traditional BI, and you had the major players, Business Objects and Cognos and MicroStrategy, and they covered dashboarding, but a lot of this was very IT centric, right? So you needed the IT teams to build the data warehouses and to build the access to all the data. And so even a lot of the reporting was complicated. So IT ended up almost doing everything, and the business did what a lot of them still do today, which is run a report and export to a spreadsheet. So what this transition to modern BI, according to Gartner, which happened around the 2016, was really around data visualization and putting power in the hands of the business. So instead of having IT produced like traditional BI, it was IT enabled. Still need some IT involvement, but with the right technology. Now you see there Microsoft, because of Power BI, Click and Tableau as examples. You could really empower the business to do more of that on their own if you have a centralized, governed type of, data sets for the users to use. So this is how that transition started. If we carry forward from 2016 to today, go to the next slide. This is really where the 2023 Gartner Magic Quadrant. So you can kind of see now there's still Click, Tableau, and Microsoft. Tableau got acquired by Salesforce, but it's kind of shifted a little bit. Now Microsoft's kind of sitting up, and for the last several years, Microsoft has been furthest to the right and furthest up. And so the excitement around Power BI, I don't have to read the quote there, but if you read that on the right, it looks like 97% of the Fortune 500 companies are now leveraging Power BI and finding success with that. So I'll pass it back to you, Todd, but we'll be doing the live demonstration of what this modern BI with something like Power BI looks like in just a few minutes.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Yeah, so along those lines, if we look back at that data maturity continuum and the different contexts with which these kind of problems are solved, this idea of around data aware is what we see is most common. I can't tell you how many times when we ask companies how they're consuming information today, typically legacy ERP reporting and exporting data into Excel in various forms and in various places in silos, and then manually preparing those reports. That's not uncommon. Sometimes with a Power BI front end on top of it, but still not that full end-to-end automation process and the data modeling that can really extend that value. There are multiple challenges that exist with this, but the issue with legacy ERP reporting tools is that they're, as Adam said, IT centric and become usable for highly technical skills and power users, but not often more broadly available. And with that automation in place, along with that comes the governance of that. So if you move forward to what that can look like, the data warehousing approach, where you are creating a very different model that doesn't rely on Excel, doesn't rely on the legacy tools and silos that tend to occur with Excel. You can still get the same thing if you've got data marts that are essentially representing each of those areas. And so moving that data aware approach to a more proficient or data savvy does give you a big advantage. but it's not quite the same as the next iteration, which brings that all together and does so with a model that can give you perspectives on the same governed model. You see there Databricks, that's really a representation of how cloud computing is really changing the data pipelines and the connection of that data, whether it's just from your ERP environment with JDE Edwards or other data sources as well. But that data-driven approach where it really does give you the ability to leverage all of that data in a very structured, very predictable way. And then the technology that's on the front end makes that easier than ever. Not just Power BI, as we'll look at in a minute, but to extend that and still use Excel tools as some are used to doing, and not to mention the additional capability that continues to evolve by the day. So whether it's machine learning, artificial intelligence, the data science models that are available, that gives you the ability to really become data-driven, and not just in a descriptive way, but in a more predictive way. And that is a huge step forward where data-driven really does drive the decision-making and becomes a core competency across an organization. If we look at that a little deeper, you see with legacy reporting that you're talking about typically departmental data silos, whether that's in Excel or purpose-built reporting tools that are very focused on one area, rather than a unified and enterprise-wide platform. Multiple views of the truth instead of one version of the truth. One of my favorite examples was early on in this data-driven journey. As the CIO at Cliff Bar, I asked 5 different people, well, how many brands do we have at Cliff Bar? And got 5 different answers because there was no clear definition, and each individual's spreadsheet had a different answer. Some looked at Z-Bar as a sub-brand, not a brand. Some looked at Luna as almost a super brand. And anyway, you get the idea. That's not uncommon when you don't have that single source of truth. We already mentioned the IT resources and how that can be overcome in leveraging that across the enterprise, rather than it being very specific departmental types of approach. And then, of course, the data silos across all. So I won't read through the rest here, but trying to compare that in a legacy lens versus an enterprise analytics lens is really the difference between data-driven or not. In a JDE Edwards environment, that's especially true because you have a lot of things to overcome just in leveraging the JDE Edwards data. And so if we look at it before and after from the JDE Edwards lens, and of course this would apply to other data sources, you may have separate sources for point of sale, demand planning, manufacturing. Same would be true there, making sure that's all feeding into that single holistic model. Just the initial challenges on the JDE Edwards side with the table structures, with the naming conventions, the decimal precision, Julian date conversions, calendaring alone is no small feat. And that all becomes part of a holistic solution. To be data-driven means you're doing that transformation and having that foundation in your data modeling that then begins to unlock all of the technology, whether Power BI or otherwise, that's simply very hard to do otherwise. So if we look at that as a solution, we'll look at here in a minute a live demo of our solution, Quick Launch for JDE Edwards. This is the overall model where Databricks is a cloud-based pipeline and repository for that data, high-performing, economical, secure, and that feeds into the data modeling that Adam will walk through in a minute to give us an end-to-end solution that does take that 80-20 and flips it back to 20-80. It happens through the translation on the JDE side and any auxiliary data sources that we want to add, feeds that into a very automated process where then it is inheriting data security. It is providing the different perspectives that are necessary to make good decisions all across conformed dimensions that are consistent across all of the data model. They're not in silos, they're across all of that data model. And of course, then having an out-of-the-box measure and KPIs to really get to what you need and do so in a very, very fast adoption curve. Then on the front end, we already talked a little bit about this, and we'll see a demo here in a minute. But that's really what Quick Launch is the automation of the preparation of that data and transformation, all of the data modeling, specifically over years of experience in optimizing that for a JD Edwards environment and making sure to leverage all of the capability with what is the leading analytics tool out there in Power BI. So with that, I'll stop sharing here and turn it over to Adam to provide a live demo.
Thank you, Todd. All right, let me go ahead and show my screen. And I think we should be seeing, okay. You see my screen okay? Not yet.
Not yet.
There it goes. Are you seeing it now? Yep, there it goes. Okay. So yeah, so this is we're going to try and cover a lot here in the next 15 to 20 minutes as we wrap up. We're going to start, if some of you are new to Power BI, just to kind of showcase how do you consume some of this information. So we'll log into the Power BI web service and kind of navigate the Power BI app. Then we'll go through that and looking. All of this is going to be over JD Edwards data. We happen to be using our Quick Launch as the source of all of this and our data model. However, the same capabilities are native to Power BI if you have a nice governed data model to start from. So we'll go through looking at some general ledger analysis, some management operating statements for those traditional P&Ls and balance sheets, show how in the operation side, maybe looking at some sales activity and analysis there. And then we'll get into some ad hoc. We'll build some quick, maybe purchasing report in Power BI, and then we'll even show how you can use Excel to get at the same centralized and governed data. Okay, so I'm going to start with, I'm logged into the Power BI service here. So if you just go to powerbi.com, hit sign in, obviously you have to make sure you're already kind of set up in your organization. And it's going to authenticate with your Active Directory. So if I've logged in, I'm going to navigate on the left-hand side here that says apps. So this might be where you basically are going to load up, different workspaces is how you're going to organize your content. And then you can publish the reports from a workspace to an app. And this would be for read-only consumption that's still going to be interactive in nature. So I'm going to go ahead and select this Quick Launch Reports app. And we'll just kind of go through a little bit of the how to navigate, the app. In this case, this might be, the main app. You've got an executive dashboard. There's a finance set of reports, maybe some operations reports, some documentation. We'll also notice that if we want to go and share this, right, we can go ahead and copy a link and send it to somebody, or, we can chat in Teams, add a comment. You can subscribe. So maybe I want to get an update every day of what's going on with this specific report or dashboard that I'm looking at. So you can go ahead and I can subscribe to that and have that email. And the email will then come with a little screenshot of the report as well as a link, so I can go ahead and interact with it live. Now, if I logged into the same app, maybe as an executive, right, you'll notice that maybe we took off the documentation, or maybe with finance, right, maybe it's back, but we've actually limited. I mean, finance has it all, but if we're looking at somebody in operations, there's no finance tab at all. So you have centralized all this data, but you can then still restrict it based on the users, so people only see what they really should based on their specific profile. So if I navigate here to the financial ratios report, these are all sample reports that are part of the Quick Launch solution. So for each module of JD Edwards, we support 15 of those, there'll be a sample report. This is part of the general ledger. So we build into the GL lots of ratios and KPIs. So this would be things like current ratio, quick ratio, AR turn, days receivable, inventory turns. So I can see here days receivable, I'm trending red towards my goal, which may have been prior year. If I click on that, it'll then drill down and see, well, what's my days receivable trended over time? And now we can see month by month how that's looking. I was actually doing better or in the current days receivable, which was in blue, until all of a sudden November, when all of a sudden it took a switch, right? And so what's the cause of that days receivable moving in the wrong direction? Well, if you take the numerator, net sales and average AR, as a denominator, you can see a declining net sales and an increasing AR is what's causing that. So you can completely tailor the experience for how your users are going to analyze, and we'll showcase some of that as we continue on to see how do you not just realize, okay, there's an issue, the data is telling me something, how do I find the answer to that, right? I think that's the key of having the interactivity to be able to drill down to that level of detail. So for instance, here, this is now looking at maybe kind of like a P&L graphically with Power BI. So we've got things like revenue compared to our budget in prior year, gross profit percent, expenses. And we can see some of the revenue breakdown compared to the budget compared to by region. Now this is all for 2023, let's say period 9. If I go back and look at moving forward, maybe period 10 instead of period 9, it'll recalculate on the fly. Instead of month to date, maybe let's look at year to date as an example. There we go. Right, and now it's going to go ahead and change and recalculate. So we don't have to kind of have a separate tab for each of those. You can go back and click on a different period or year if we want. And again, just updates on the screen. So instead of having a traditional report that might be 20 pages long, this kind of gives you a real quick view of that. If I want to see here what's making up our expenses, we're over in mobile, right? Well, if we can see there our actuals are 1.8, 1.63 was our prior year. We can go ahead and right click on that. Maybe we want to drill through to the expense tab, right? Maybe now it's a little more deeper dive into what makes that up. And so for instance, if we've got the expenses by admin expenses, sales and marketing, these would all be probably based on your category codes. So how you define your roll-ups for your chart of accounts, we work with you on that. But we can see if we wanted to drill into this in sales and marketing, I can right click on that and we can drill down. In this case, we've told this chart to then drill down to the object account. So right there, we've seen maybe some aggregated bucket. And then we can go to the rent expense and notice, okay, what makes up those details of the 106,000 for the actuals for rent. And if we right click on that and drill through to the transactions, now we can kind of see all those details. In this case, we got lots of journal entries, but here's a payment voucher for United Rentals. And so if you're doing any type of document imaging, you can then drill down to those scanned documents if you want to kind of set that up. So again, if you think about what we've done, we've gone from a high level consolidated dashboard, drill down in a specific area of expenses to a specific set of accounts and roll-ups there, down to the GL transactions, down to the specific invoice and the scanned document of that. So a lot of power putting in the hands of users. And if we're enforcing your JDE Edwards to say business unit security or company security, all that's going to be applied as we go. If I go and look at one of these other tabs like revenue, again, you'll set up these however you like, and you'll build all kinds of new reports on your own. And Power BI is really good at getting some nice, slick graphical representations of your data that a lot of executives get really excited about seeing some of that data in a new light, in a new way with some alerting functionality built in. So if you still need to analyze some traditional income statements and balance sheets, here's that traditional flavor, month to date, actual budget variance. We could do the same type of experience and drill down in the traditional format, right? May I drill down on sales and marketing, down to the object account, click on the object account, down to the full account structure, and then we can drill in from that down to the scanned document, or sorry, down to the GL transaction. And then actually from there, it'll then take us the next step, which will go down to the scanned document like we did before. So in this case, we're drilling from the paginated type P&L down to the GL transaction, and then we can click on that to get to that same document level. So this is all looking at some financial information. We can do the same thing around sales. A couple things. If we look at on the sales side, getting out of finance for a moment. Here's maybe a sample sales report. Let's just look at this year to date really quick. And here, like we've got maybe a sales performance by sales rep. Okay, if I wanted to expand this, right now we can kind of see if I click on Robert O'Neill and maybe Mary Fields and hit play, it's going to go month by month and then transition. What's that year-to-date sales broken down by month? So again, this is all just native Power BI functionality. It just happens to be very quick and easy to get going when you have a model to start from. Same kind of thing with these waterfall charts, right? I can see my top 10 customers, but we're doing a waterfall based on the comparing their sales activity versus the prior year. So we can see in almost all cases, we're doing really good with exception of maybe Newegg, right? So we want to see the details of Newegg. We'll drill down and then, maybe we had drill down to the product group, click on mobile, drill down to, the specific, category codes all the way down to the SKU. So if you think about it, all these areas, you can bring in, and we are bringing in data down to the same as all those inquiry screens in JD Edwards. That's the level of grain of data we're bringing into the model. And then we can slice and dice that any different way you want. And we can drill down and drill through to see what makes up, these, 2.7 million in sales and wearables. Let's drill through to the sales order detail. And now you can kind of see these are all those specific transactions that roll into that. Now, we're looking at Newegg. So maybe if I'm sitting down with Newegg at a Starbucks, right, we can maybe look at, here is their specific performance. And you could be doing this on an iPad. Doesn't have to be necessarily on your laptop per se. And here's an example of an app you can just download from the visualizations that there's all kinds of developers building those for Power BI. Here's a narrative example. So it'll actually rewrite a narrative. So it'll mine the data. Total sales 10.4 million over across 21 products. Was driven primarily by smartwatches, Galaxy View. If I select one of these others on the left, it's to rewrite and retransition all the visuals and so on. Pretty cool stuff. Also, if we're ever looking at things like on time and full, right, you can go ahead and start monitoring that as well. So looking at the time, I'm going to try and transition to a brief amount of ad hoc, and we'd be happy to dive in deeper here, anybody who's interested. So I'm going to open up Power BI Desktop, and let me just get that on a different screen here. So if you're going to get started with Power BI, you can go out there, just download Power BI Desktop, and it's a free tool. And so that's where a lot of companies will download Power BI Desktop for free, grab data from a spreadsheet, and start prototyping some reports and dashboards, which is a great way to kind of get excited and get others excited about what you can do with it. It's just a matter of when you want to turn into production reporting and get that governance is where you have to kind of think through what's this pipeline of data coming from all these different sources. So I'm going to go ahead and you'll notice when I open this up, there's nothing in the data tab. So I need to select some data. So you get data, analysis services. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the link to where that data set resides. It's in Power BI. So if I go ahead and put that in, choose OK, it's going to force me to authenticate. So I'll go ahead and choose the account that I'm authenticating with. And now you'll notice that we've got this data model. And if I expand that, you're going to start seeing something that looks like a lot of those different modules and different kind of elements that correlate to some of those JD Edwards tables behind the scenes. So give it a second, it'll open up here. So you'll see like there's 27 in this model: GL, AR, AP, sales, inventory. So let's say that we want to build a real quick open POs by supplier. So if I go down to purchase order detail, And I'll just select that perspective. So I'm as a user, I don't have to think about, okay, what's the purchase order table in JD Edwards and how's that going to relate to the address book and the supplier and the item branch and the lot and the work order. Like all that is kind of things that I don't have to think about as a user. I just can select this specific area and it's going to go ahead and know, okay, these are the tables that have good relationships that you can already drag and drop into the canvas. So now on the right, you're going to see in this data tab, it's going to appear with some elements for purchasing. So we also do is provide, if I mouse over any of these objects, you'll see a little tooltip. Oh, that's the 4311. If I go down and look at that, we've got some measures like purchase order amounts. We've got all these other fields, and everything's kind of documented with that lineage back to the element. So let's say a real quick one, do open POs by supplier. Just grab PO amount open, drag that into canvas. Let's go down to our supplier. Let that render for a second. And let's go ahead and grab our supplier and let's bring our supplier name. 2 clicks, we now have our open POs by supplier. And we can go ahead and say, well, let's go ahead and I'm going to want to exclude a couple of these objects, maybe for the sake of this demo. So I can just exclude those. Now we start to see some of this. Now, we may want to drill down from the parts emporium down to the item. So we can go to the item branch, right? Or we also even created a little bit of a unique item. And if I mouse over this item account and description as an example, it'll do a lookup and say, okay, well, if there's an item, then use that. If not, use the account number, right? So you kind of always get something to drill down to, which is kind of, we built something like that because we had multiple customers asking for something like that. We go ahead and drill back up. Maybe we want to resort this again, sort this in descending order. And I want to go in here and I want to maybe sort this again by PO amount. Okay, so now if we were to look at Parts Emporium and right click on this, we could drill down and then we can kind of see what are those items there. Now, maybe I want to add a brief data table below. So if we go to, let's say, our branch, right? So I want to have, maybe just drag this down and maybe we want the branch. Maybe we want, the item branch, which is the item and description down here. Let's go ahead, maybe add again the supplier. All right, we can grab maybe the lot. So, I don't think about all these table relationships. I can just drag them in. And let's just look at maybe our quantity open and quantity ordered. So if we go and look at our quantity under the purchase order detail, we've got a quantity ordered, let's say, and a quantity open. And now as we navigate up above, we can go ahead and select one of these and it'll filter down the chart below, right? So you can have that interactivity. Now, what if actually these are all just my items and these are quantities, but you want to do some unit and measure conversion, right? Maybe I want to convert every boxes to eaches or cases. So you could do that as well. So if you go down to, let's say, selected unit of measure and just drag this selected filter, make that a slicer, you could change on the fly and it's going to recalculate those quantities based on those different unit of measures if you actually had that kind of set up. Okay. So one thing I want to point out here is if we look at this type, I'm going to duplicate this tab. And it's a little more real estate here. Let's just take this table. So if we're looking at, let's say, the branch and item, I'll get rid of some of these others that kind of give us a little bit of a cleaner slate here. Maybe I want this to be a matrix, right? So it becomes almost like a pivot table. We can see branch and description. Here's our quantity open, okay? So let's say you want to get from sales, what is that sales quantity? Well, if I go, I don't see sales here, I grab purchasing, right? So if I want to go and get sales, you could go out here and just hit view hidden. Because we connect to a model, it's all there. So now we can go down to our sales. And I'm going to just grab, let's say, our quantity ordered. I'll bring that into the mix right above our quantity open. So this is now looking at our quantity ordered from sales. Here's our quantity open purchasing. What's quantity on hand in inventory? Well, let's just go down to inventory snapshot, and we can grab, let's say, our quantity on hand and bring that in the mix. You can then do calculations across these. So relations across this all is possible because of those relationships that have been identified. And I know we're gonna have about 3 minutes to go here, and then we're gonna turn it back over to the final wrap up. But if we look at, let's say, all these tables, so this is kind of what's sitting behind the scenes of what we've been demonstrating. So if I zoom in here, once we start seeing the names of some of these objects, it's gonna be very familiar to a lot of you. Of course, no one wants to go and think through, how do all these relate from your transportation, your inventory, your purchasing, your sales, but all that's kind of been done. So for instance, let's say you want to build an AR report. If I just grab accounts receivable and add related tables, you can analyze AR by subledger, by customer, and keep adding more tables. It just shows you all those relationships that you can analyze data across the organization. So things like the item branch, right? You wouldn't want to put that in every siloed data set you have, but if you bring all of that into one, we bring in our item branch and add related tables, we can do that. So in the final minute, as we pass it over, I wanted to show one more thing because I hate to have somebody that really wanted to see Excel and not to get a chance to see that. So putting the pressure on, I'm going to try and build a as of aging and AR in about 1 minute. So I'm going to hit data, get data from analysis services. And let me go ahead and grab that same URL, put that in here. And I'm going to authenticate again. And the first time I think you connect sometimes from Excel, it might take about 30 seconds for it to kind of establish its connection. So what's going to happen now is, oh, it came up quick. So I've connected to the model. Again, I could select a different model, select a perspective. Let's just grab accounts receivable, hit finish. And so if you're familiar with pivot tables, I've got now a connection to that data set from Excel. I'm not exporting 20 million rows of data to my spreadsheet. I'm going to, in essence, get those objects, and as I interact at the pivot table, it's just going to constantly go back and query back and forth to that data set. Okay, so this is, I think, where that 30 seconds might take in as I get the initial connection in the spreadsheet. So when I was in the Power BI service to export to Excel, there would have been an analyze in Excel option. So it's not exporting the data. You can export the data physically to a spreadsheet, or you can analyze, and it creates a dynamic pivot table. So very quickly here, let me go ahead and collapse all. So we've got customer. Let's bring in our customer name here as our rows. Let's go up and grab our accounts receivable. We've got AR aging amounts. You got current aging, that's easy. As of is a little more complicated, a lot more complicated actually. So here's an as of. Let's grab an aging band, drag that as our columns. So now you can kind of start seeing those, 21, your different aging buckets that you would have, but we need to go back in time. So if I grab a calendar aging and go, let's say year period, bring that to our filter. And now we go back, and let's pick maybe back from June or July. So now if we go back and select, let's say 2023 period 7, it's going to recalculate the true as of aging for that time. And so now we can see this is the aging as it was back in July. Now we can I need to know for Clearview Specialties, what are the items or what are the document numbers that make that up? And so we bring this in and just drag that below. Now we've got a pivot table, and I could have 10 different tabs on this pivot table, all against different data sources and different modules and everything. This might be 10 kilobytes in size. As the users interact, for instance, to see what makes up Clearview, I could just select on that. It'll expand, and it'll expand to show me these are the documents for that specific supplier or customer, sorry. So I'm looking at the clock. I think I went a couple minutes over, but I'll pass it back over to you, Bill, to wrap things up and look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Todd and Adam. And Adam, can you stop sharing your screen? I just want to switch over.
Did that work? I said,
Yeah, I think we're good. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, again, thanks so much, Todd and Adam. And now I'd like to cover a few follow-up items. Then we're going to move into our questions and answers section of our webcast. Did want to mention, we ask you please take a moment to click on the link that I've provided in the chat and complete a short survey before we get into our Q&A. Your feedback is really appreciated. For those that do complete the survey, you'll be entered into a chance to win a $25 Amazon gift card. It'll only take about 30 seconds. So if you don't mind, click on that link in the chat and complete the survey. We'll just give you 30 seconds or so to complete that. Okay, let's keep on going here. If you would like to set up a deep dive demonstration of Quick Launch for Power BI or discuss how GSI can help address any of your JD Edwards needs, you can reach out to me via my contact info. I also provided that information in the chat as well. Did want to mention that GSI provides lots of free educational resources, including our weekly educational webcast, our monthly newsletter called the GSI Insider. We have lots of great content out on our YouTube channel. We do participate in all the major industry conferences, events, and regional user group meetings. And of course, we have our online and virtual workshops as well. You can stay connected with GSI on our many social media channels. And now let's get into the Q&A. And I see we already have several questions submitted online, and I do appreciate your patience, but did want to remind you, if you'd still like to submit a question, you can do so by clicking on that Q&A icon in the middle of the Zoom menu. Okay, let's jump into the questions. Hang on one second, let me just bring them up here. Okay, our first question comes from Mark, and the question is the data lakehouse mentioned in the live demo, quick launch slide, Microsoft Fabric, and if not, where does MS Fabric fit into this?
Yeah, so great question. The slide that includes the data lakehouse is specifically Azure Databricks. It is well connected though under the Fabric umbrella. Obviously, the moves that Microsoft has continued to make encompassing the end-to-end Fabric includes Power BI as well as Data Factory and some of the other elements that have evolved from Synapse. We do watch that very closely. Right now, the difference between Databricks and Fabric is a bit of a gap, but it's closing in. Right now, Databricks is more economical and more predictable in performance. But over time, that will change, and we will certainly be ready to support Fabric as well. In terms of the overall architecture and how that fits in, Quick Launch can connect to any JD Edwards source, and frankly, any other auxiliary source out there as well. So if you're DB2, Oracle, SQL Server, doesn't matter, that will all feed into that data lakehouse. Different approaches depending on your backend, but that all fits into that data lakehouse. The other significant factor with respect to the Azure data lakehouse is our development of an AI engine. That AI engine will probably be something we release in Q1 of next year. And it does sit on top of and leverage the Azure machine learning, AI, and all of the data science models available through both Databricks and Azure. So that's an important component for that overall architecture. And happy to take a side conversation and dig into all the details because there are a lot of moving parts when we look at that overall data lakehouse architecture.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thanks, Todd. Now we'd like to move to our next question. Comes in from Rob, and the question is, are the data sets used by this available to Power BI for our use?
Adam, you want to take that and talk about how Quick Launch data model fits in?
Yeah, so with Power BI, there's different versions, whether or not it's free, pro, and then premium, a few different flavors of that. But once you start consuming lots of data from lots of sources, you kind of get forced down the path of a premium if you want to leverage the data sets within Power BI. So a lot of if you just start modeling data, you can kind of build these. What we were showing today was our Power BI premium data set that already had those related. So that's what the quick launch deliverable is. We talked about the lake house. What we're doing is querying that lake house and feeding and incrementally kind of loading this Power BI data set that's across all modules, or 15 of the modules that exist in JDE. So I don't know, Todd, if there's anything else that you would want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think that covers it.
Okay, well, thanks, Rob, Adam, Todd. Our next question comes in from Noah, and the question is, what infrastructure is required to run Quick Launch?
Yeah, I think we touched on some of that, but from a back end, the data acquisition and transformation is happening from any JD Edwards source. Some iSeries connectivity may require a third-party adapter so that we can get the refresh schedules that we want, but that's all established and then feeding directly into the Azure Data Lakehouse. That is the extent of the infrastructure. Then the rest sits on top with Power BI being a service. So end to end, that's really about connectivity on the back end. The Lakehouse is where that modeling is happening, and then Power BI on the front end.
Okay. Thanks, Noah. Thanks, Todd and Adam. Our next question comes in from Sophia, and the question is, what version of Power BI is required?
Yeah, so the Power BI service is a cloud-based service, and it is there is just one version, though you can license in different ways. But that is a code current service that Microsoft tends to update about once a month. We do make sure everything's compatible. So as Microsoft will make new iterations and new functionality, we make sure that all that reverse compatibility is there for any previous version that's connecting that in-memory data set.
Okay, well, thanks, Sophia. Thanks, Todd. Our next question comes in from Mateo, and the question is, does this support JD Edwards business unit security?
Yeah, so security obviously is critical with any use of JD Edwards data. And there are a number of different aspects. Business unit security is one of those. So Quick Launch will inherit full business unit security. We can include row level security. We can include different data sets that have different security requirements. So for example, if you have an HR perspective that's separate from the rest of your environment. So any level of security can be applied, both inherited from JD Edwards or even sitting outside of that to supplement that as it then feeds Power BI.
Okay, well, thanks, Mateo. Thanks, Todd. Our next question comes in from Benu. The question is, will Power BI reports update real time?
Adam, you want to talk to the different options on refresh?
Yeah, so when you're dealing with Power BI data sets and large sums of data, which a lot of JD Edwards customers may have, there's a couple different types of connectivity. So what is an import, where you can import data? That is the current mode of our Power BI data sets that then the reports are connected to. But the nice thing is, those are set up on a schedule that you define. So maybe you want to load up your data set every hour. However, in your month-end close, maybe your controller wants to hit a button and have it automate, instantaneously. There is another what's called direct query. We always keep an eye on finding that balance of performance. Direct queries always have a lag. Every click, wait, click and wait, click and wait. So ours are import mode, but we're incrementally kind of loading that data. So if you've got 10 years of data, we don't need to load every hour 10 years of JD Edwards data. We can park 9.5 years of data in memory and just load the current month, the current quarter, the current year, whatever makes sense. And so that's how you get the optimized performance of loading, and you can set your own intervals, and you set the schedule within the Databricks environment of how frequently those Power BI data sets will be updated.
Okay, well, thanks, Banu. Thanks, Adam. Our next question and our final question comes in from Colin. Is there an audit field on how you can tell who and when users are logging into BI?
Yeah, so Microsoft Power BI does have usage analytics. I will say that's gotten better in recent years. It wasn't that great to begin, but it's really gotten much further along. And so the usage analytics there can be used in real time to see what's happening and when, and to be able to track that. So that's out of the box with Power BI. It can be customized so that you can also see exception reporting based on certain types of audits. So all that's out of the box functionality with Power BI.
Perfect. Colin, Todd, we appreciate it. Okay, I know we're running out of time here, so let's keep on going here. I did want to mention again that if you would like to set up a complimentary demonstration of Quick Launch or discuss how GSI can address any of your JDE Edwards needs, you can reach out via my contact information, which I have chatted out to you as well. Adam, Todd, any closing comments?
No, thanks again to everyone who attended. Bill, thanks to you and GSI for the great partnership, and speak for everybody at Preferred. We're happy to help with any of your data-driven goals ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been a great opportunity to connect with you guys today, and look forward to any questions that appear. Just feel free to reach out.
Okay, well, thanks, Todd, Adam, and everyone for attending today's presentation. I did want to mention one last final thought. We're going to be following up with copies of the presentation as well as a link to the recording. So if you'd like to share that with your colleagues or review that, we'll make that available here over the next couple of days. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.